Welcome to the Growth Pod. Today on the podcast, we have Nicole Grinnell, who is a two-time business owner and the founder of Mic'd Up Booking. It's now her goal to share the power of podcasting to other entrepreneurs and business owners. Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Angela. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I am very excited for our chat today. It's something that we're both very passionate about, which is podcasting. But specifically, you're going to share how podcasting can be used to fix your marketing budget. Before we get started, can you share a little bit about why you believe in the power of podcasting as a marketing tool?
Absolutely. So I will tell you why I believe in it so much is really kind of the origin of how the company even came to be. My first company was actually in staffing, and we work with a lot of small business owners. And along the way, all these years, people have said, hey, I struggle with getting my message out. I don't know how to tell my story. I don't have an ad budget of $20,000 to $30,000 a month to play the game. Like, how can you help me get my name out there? And so really about 8 years ago, we started kind of growing up with the podcast community and realizing that not only was this a great way to get your message out, but it was a very time efficient and financial and resource efficient way for business owners to kind of one stop shop all the goals that we as business owners have in marketing, networking, SEO, content, everything. And I was like looking around, like, why is everyone not doing this? This is amazing. And that's when we launched Mic'd Up.
I love that. I think that what you're saying about how you can use podcasting in so many different ways, and you don't really realize that when you think about a podcast. It can also create content for your blog, like you mentioned, for SEO. You can use a topic that you were able to refine in an episode for the topic of an email newsletter and for your social content. And so I'm really excited to learn more from you about how you've been able to leverage this for your clients, since podcasting has been such a great benefit for me. But what are some of those benefits that you've seen with your clients when they start leveraging podcasting for their businesses?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on quite a few that honestly are very, very important is making sure that, I'm sure you've heard too, like, yeah, I did a podcast, nothing came of it. Well, you didn't really do the podcast. You were on one, but you didn't take advantage of all that. And so, what we really saw, and, I like to be the guinea pig for everything. So, I was like, hey, my team, go pitch me on shows. And what I found was, the podcast community and podcast hosts, they're at a place of wanting to give back, wanting to connect, wanting to network. So it naturally was an amazing stage for you to come in, tell what your message was, and then be able to go in for that ask with the host to say, you've heard my story. Is there anyone that you think I could help in your network? Is there anyone that could use this product or service? So that was first and foremost, because I'm, as a business owner, I'm thinking I only have so much time to go network, right? So this was a great way of having a one-on-one conversation and asking those referrals. And then, really, post show, I was getting all of that content. I was repurposing it for newsletters. We were posting it on our websites. My team would splice that up even for sales conversations. So, hey, Bob, I know you said you were struggling with delegating. Take a listen to this show where I talk about the top 10 ways to delegate. So, I was starting to build that validity and street cred, so to speak. People were able to hear my why, my message, my process in their own time, as opposed to me coming in and trying to sell them on it, so to speak. And so it really was for that business owner who I know struggles with time, resources, plan, strategy, all that. Like, how do I get this done to be a one stop shop for that? And so that's really what I've seen the power of podcasts to be.
Yeah, I think that you are really taking it to that next level when you ask for referrals. Referrals is a great source of business, and they're usually a lot of a warmer lead. And not only are you getting the referrals, but now you're able to use that content in your marketing, like you said, to share with people who are struggling with something that you already spoke on. And you're able to really take this long form piece of content and use it in so many different ways. So let's say you're listening to this and you're a small business owner and you're loving this concept of being able to do more with less time. And you think that starting a podcast really could be the next step for you. So, where should you start if you're considering starting a new podcast?
So it's funny because I get asked this a lot. And I always say, there are different seasons and stages for every business owner for every level. So there is a season where you being the guest is more appropriate for both your time, your resources, and your goals, right? You may be in a space where you're like, I can't even think about producing a show, trying to find guests. I mean, I'm sure you know the administration, the time, everything, it's a lot, right? And we can help people with that. But there may be a season where you're like, I need to be the guest. I need to grow my sales. I need to grow my business. And that's where guesting is an amazing space. If you are not at that place in a business where you're like, you know what? Business is running great. I would love now to be able to expand my network by inviting conversations, bringing in people to my network. I have more time to focus on the business, not in the business. Hosting is an awesome space for that. So we try to guide our clients through that to really understand, both in time, both in resources, both in financial and budget, where they should go and help them explore each avenue.
I actually love that you brought up guesting because I was going to ask you if you thought that that had the same impact as hosting a podcast. And so obviously your answer to that is yes. So, how do you go about creating a successful guesting strategy if starting a podcast isn't right for you in this season of business?
Yeah, this is actually part of my favorite part that our team does and that I have done personally with them, because I actually don't have a show. I've only done guesting. I hope to get to that level of host at some point, but again, where the season is of growing multitude businesses, it's just not right now. But one piece that we love to do is say, okay, let's sit down and understand the goal of this, right? Just like any marketing effort, you don't just throw up marketing content for nothing. We need to have an end goal. So is it new clients? Is it more exposure? Is it getting your story out? Is it expanding your audience? And so what we try to do with our clients is sit down and understand the goal and then build out a way to accomplish that. So a lot of what our time on the front end is spent is understanding that goal, bringing discussion topics, and then going out and marketing them to shows to say, hey, here's why we really believe Sally's going to be an amazing fit, and here's the value that she hopes to bring. One thing we really teach our podcast guests is it's a connection, it's not a commercial, right? So really helping them understand that this isn't about just going on and saying, hey, for $9.95 you can get my little widget here. It's about understanding who they're working with and building that connection.
I love that you start with the goal and build from there when it comes to guesting. I'm certain that if somebody's hosting, that's the right way to go as well. For somebody who's guesting on a podcast, now they have their goal, let's say it's to, generate more leads for their business. How do you map what they're doing in their guesting back to driving what the goal is for their business?
Yeah, so that's where really podcast booking coaches are so key, because we want to make sure that we have our clients set up for success in understanding how to ask for the referral. We call it our green room ROI. So really understanding how to go in and ask, nurture those relationships, just because just like any networking connection, that relationship needs to be nurtured. And then what are you doing with that content post show? We, of course, have services to help with all of that. Sometimes people have their own marketing team, sometimes they're doing it in house, but saying, hey, you had a really great show on a great way that people can see what you do. Let's make sure we're repurposing that into newsletters. Oh, you don't have a MailChimp list? Let's start building that. Let's start getting your contacts. So we really, we're a podcast booking agency, but I feel like our small business roots help us really try to figure out a solution for success for all of our clients and understanding that with them.
I think that's so important, making sure that you're taking what you're doing when you're guesting and repurposing it in a bunch of different ways. Something we talk a lot about on this podcast is the importance of a marketing ecosystem. And I can see that's exactly what you're setting up when you're creating a podcast guesting strategy and a repurposing strategy for your clients. You're making sure that not only are they doing an amazing guest performance, but now you're able to take that and bring it into your marketing ecosystem, set it all up in MailChimp or their email service provider, and make sure that it's living a life that's fully utilized for that content.
I mean, honestly, Angela, I'm going to take you on the road with me. You get it. I know we're speaking your lingo for sure, but yeah, that's exactly what our approach is and what we hope to do.
Yeah, I love that. I think that Connecting everything in the way that you've explained really produces better results for small businesses. Big businesses, they have great teams. They have somebody who can sit and email and pitch podcasts all day long. And as a small business owner, it doesn't make sense to have somebody in house full time doing that. Instead, your message and your ability to grow your business is amplified when you're able to bring on people who specialize in this type of service.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So let's get back to structuring podcast interviews. If you are trying to create a guesting strategy, what is something that you would share? You mentioned that you don't want to get on and pitch your widget. What should you talk about if you're new to guesting?
I think the biggest thing we see, really as a society as a whole, but certainly in the marketplace, is people want to kind of see behind the curtain of a business. They want to know who they're working with, what's their why, what's their purpose, what maybe even is their philanthropy. I mean, there's a lot of things that people want to see and discover, and then they identify with, right? So I'll use myself as an example. There's a lot of podcasts that I'll go on. Maybe it's women business owners. Maybe it's being a mom entrepreneur. Maybe it's leading an all women organization. So there's things that your client base are going to identify with and go, oh, I really love that. I mean, I've had people call and say, hey, I heard you on this podcast. And I love that you grew up in a small business owner household because that's what I did. And I know it's just a different mindset. We work differently and I want to work with you. Right. So, and you want to attract that because like minded businesses and like minded clients are going to work well together. So, what we try to do, because I'm sure you know this, people will sit down and go, what do I have to say? Like, I don't have like an interesting story. And it's like, so we have kind of questions to prompt them on that and say, okay, now we've actually built this out and look at your marketing kit. And sometimes they're actually surprised, like, wow, yeah, I guess I have accomplished that, or that is my story. And so we try to encourage them to get that word out there. So first and foremost is really just your story, your why. And then we kind of tailor that into the goals, right? So if it's new clients, let's make sure we have a clear message when it comes, because inevitably the host will say, like, let's learn a little bit more about your business. Let's make sure we're not having a infomercial approach, but let's make sure we have the understanding of why. And so we just try to guide our clients through all of that.
Amazing. And so when you're sitting down to create that message, I love what you're talking about when, you use questions to prompt people. I use a very similar thing for creating, a marketing goal is using questions. I think that's a great way to get your brain juices flowing and figure out, oh yeah, like I do have a lot.
Hmm.
And in my experience, being a guest has naturally helped me solidify my message in the way that you said. They'll send over the guest questions. And so I'll open up a blank Notion document and not script out, but, write it out like a blog post. So everything's kind of fresh in my mind. And then I don't have that open. I have it closed completely during the interview, but I've already thought through kind of the message that I want to portray. And so it's very similar to the method that you use when you're asking people questions to create that strategy and find those pieces of their background that are super relatable.
Well, you hit on something really important there because I think something that business owners struggles with are, we're so in our business and working, and then we're kind of like forced into this networking event, right? And we really don't have time to practice who we are, our elevator pitch, what's our story. And we can find ourselves leaving with this kind of jumbled, I didn't really explain that right. I don't, what do you do? And it's like, I don't even know. And I found that podcasting was a really great way for me to organically work those kinks out and really be able to say, oh, because podcasting, hosts are coming with all sorts of different questions, sometimes on the fly. So it's a great kind of practice skill in not only public speaking, but taking that into networking, encouraging your team to listen to, because a lot of times we have team members that, yes, they work here, seems like they should know all of our services. Sometimes they don't. Maybe they don't even understand how we got here as a company. So I encourage even my team to listen to some of our shows and use that as a learning tool. So it really, really is just a really great way for business owners to hone a lot of skills while making a big impact. And obviously, the goal is to see at a great ROI.
I love what you're saying about sharing the episodes with your team. I was just guesting on a podcast earlier today, and he shared that, he sat down when he brought on somebody to help with marketing, and that marketing person asked each member of the team to explain what the business did, and it was totally disjointed. And so, this really goes back to what you were saying earlier about making sure that this content serves its whole lifespan and is you're really just milking everything out of that content because you've taken the time to create it. And so by sharing it with your team, you're solidifying that message without having to take additional time out of your day to share, these are our services, this is what we do. And you're able to do it in a way that still honors them and their role in your company. Everybody's so busy, it's not necessarily their first priority to understand every in and out of every service. And so by listening to a podcast, they're able to understand it.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So Nicole, you have two businesses, you're a active podcast guest. I want to know what's next for you.
Oh man, that's like the $1 million question always. I definitely feel, entrepreneurial in spirit for sure, and always kind of looking at, what the next business could be, service, whatever that looks like. But I think ultimately, my heart is just in business and finding ways to support business owners, whatever way that looks like. So who knows? There maybe, I mean, podcasting was never on my radar 8 years ago, but it really came out of a need of a client going, "Hey, I need help with this," and me trying to figure out a way to solve that. And so you never know what other service line will come up out of that.
I love that. If anyone's interested in keeping up with you to see, what may be coming down the pipeline or to get in touch with you for your podcasting services, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, I would love if anybody can check out. And even if you just want to go on there and learn more about podcasting community in general and what that could look like, our website is micdupbooking.com. So just MICDUP booking.com.
And that link, of course, will be in the show notes. So if you were listening and any of this sounded good to you, it's right there and you can get in touch with Nicole. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, Angela.
Of course. If you enjoyed this episode of the Growth Pod, please leave us a review. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.